Ambassador Raghavan, you've spent a number of years in Pakistan. Till last year, you were the Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. What are your thoughts on Pakistan today?
Well, following Sashi is always a very, very hard act to follow. It's a very compelling argument he has laid out. But if you think about it, he began as a hawk and ended up with very dovish solutions. And when you reflect on hawks and doves, you realize that most of the time they're saying the same thing. And they also have a common position. Yeah, sorry. So most hawks and doves really are saying the same thing. Because when you reflect on what they're saying, they both seem to assume that by following a certain set of policies, you can bring about a change in the state of Pakistan. I think we really underestimate, because of our own size, what Pakistan is about. It's a country of 200 million people, as Hussein Haqqani said. It's also a people with a very strong sense of themselves, and a sense of themselves as a nation and as a country. Whatever change is going to come about is largely not going to be because of external factors or because of India. It's going to come across about what they do themselves and how they imagine their future. So I think this is a caution which one should always bear in mind, because there are all kinds of solutions which are given by hawks and doves. And as we heard Sashi, really the number of options that we have are not so many. But whether you dialogue or don't dialogue, whether it is interrupted or uninterruptible, the point really is that we have to remain engaged with Pakistan. Just like France cannot cut itself off from what is happening across the Mediterranean in Iraq or Libya or in Syria, just like Turkey cannot cut itself off from what is happening in Syria and Iraq. Similarly, no matter how much we harden our defenses and whatever other means we take, we cannot disengage ourselves from what is happening in Pakistan. So whatever means you follow to pursue that path of engagement, the fact is you have to remain engaged. There is a third point which really struck me after hearing Mr. Haqqani when he spoke a great deal about 1947. But when you reflect on it, in fact, many of the issues we face are far more contemporary than 1947. If you think about it, this is something which is a favorite theory of mine. 1979 really is the year in which the India-Pakistan balance tipped in many ways. What happened in 1979? It was the year of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. It was the year of the Iranian, of the Shia revolution in Iran. It was also the year in which democracy in Pakistan suffered a decisive setback with the execution of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And of course, there were a number of other factors. It was also, incidentally, the year, in case you're interested, that the Karakoram highway from China to Pakistan was formally inaugurated. So I think we need not go deep into our history to find a cause for our contemporary issues. Many of them are very contemporary, and we really have to see as to how Pakistan reassesses its India policies and its Pakistan and its Afghanistan policies, because these are really the cause of what Sashi said, is as to how it has been a victim of terrorism in the last 7-8 years. In fact, if you look at the history of Pakistan between 2007 and 2014, for many Pakistanis, it was possibly the most traumatic period in their country's existence, if you exclude the 1971 crisis when East Pakistan separated. Really, if you see what they went through between 2007 and 2014, they lost their most important political, charismatic political leader. There was hardly anything in Pakistan which remained safe, whether it was military installations, whether it was civilian targets, whether it was religious shrines, hospitals, etc., etc. So really, it is, as I said, for Pakistan to reassess where its external policies vis-a-vis India and Pakistan are taking it to. And that is a determination which the Pakistanis themselves have to make. There is no way by giving more visas or by trading more or by giving certain economic concessions that you can influence that internal discussion in any meaningful way. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to comment on my friend Raghavan, because he made and he served there most recently, and I'm sure that we have to respect that judgment, that there's nothing we can do that will change the discourse or the stakes within Pakistan. If that is so, then what options do we have? It seems to me that talking by itself is not a solution unless we know what we're talking about and who we're talking to. And not talking is not a solution either, because not talking doesn't get you anywhere. And the problem is we've tried both with futile results. So perhaps it's this need to do something rather than nothing that makes me say, well, this is something that's within our control. It doesn't matter if the Pakistanis don't reciprocate, the pressure will mount on them to reciprocate. But if we can live up to what is best about our own society and our own values as a democracy and as a pluralist society, it seems to me that we should open up. Because at the end of the day, the whole thing would be that if indeed there are attacks, we would of course shut the gates again. But then the number of people who are aggrieved with their own militants and their own ISI and their own military for depriving them of what they've enjoyed with India, that will be larger. And hopefully we can create more and more of a constituency within Pakistan. I concede to Mr. Raghavan the judgment that it may not have that effect. But it seems to me that since nothing else of the available options no one has come up with another prescription, at least here's something we could do that might perhaps have a constructive effect.
Thank you, Shashiji.
May
Ambassador,
I
please.
respond? I didn't mean that we sit on our hands and do nothing. That's not what I meant at all. Neither do I agree with what Hindol just said, because if you look at what has happened in Pakistan in the last 10 years, and you see the kind of terrorist attacks which they have faced, and you ask most Pakistanis, and I'm sure if you ask your friends too, they'll tell you 100% the Indians have done this. So whether you are doing something in Baluchistan or through Afghanistan or not, it's not important. Everyone in Pakistan believes that you are behind this. So as a policy prescription that we should have the capacities, it's nice to say so, but to be realistic, what further effect will it have is something we have to think through. But I didn't mean, Sashi, that we sit on our hands and do nothing, because I think the point is, and this is very important, it's not as if things are getting worse. Things are getting better in some ways, regardless of government policy. You saw Hussain Haqqani just now. He could talk to you without a visa because technology is a big empowerer in India-Pakistan relations. You're in touch with your friends because you're on the email. You can see their movies because of YouTube. Even if movies were banned, which they are not anymore, people could see, internet is a big enabler. So things are changing for the better, quite regardless of government policy. Secondly, if you look at it carefully, things are better now than they were probably 10 or 15 years ago. 10 or 15 years ago, things were better than they were 10 or 15 years before that. It's not as if we are static or at a plateau. Things are getting better, but it's very incremental. It's very slow. It's almost glacial. But on the question of what should we do, I think there's a great deal which we can do, and I don't disagree with any of your solutions, but I think we need to deflate our sense of our own capacities. As I said, Pakistan is a country of 200 million people. In the end, it's for them to define their idea of Pakistan. We can't do it for them.
Most Pakistanis either believed or were taught to believe that India is responsible consistently for all the attacks that happen on their soil. But there is a difference. When those children died at the Northwest Frontier province, that I think was a turning point. If those editorials, when you look at the editorials written in the Dawn at that time and so on and so forth, there was a clear sort of scenario building in Pakistan where there's a realization that perhaps not every attack that happens on Pakistani soil is done by Indians. And I think that is one realization where, I credit Nawaz Sharif's government for that, because I think that's a government which has really taken this fact into cognizance, and many of the things that they're trying to push is based on this idea that there's realization that all attacks that happen on Pakistani soil are not done by Pakistanis. Many of the attacks that happen on Pakistani soil are actually done by people from Pakistan, within Pakistan, trained in Pakistan. So I think that inflection point is certainly something that we as journalists who track Pakistan notice, that in the civil society and in their media, there is an inflection point that people now believe that something has changed. Don't you think that is a reason for hope that something might be changing in that society.
Ambassador, would you like to respond to that?
Well, I agree with you. Things are changing in Pakistan. Pakistan society, like society in India, is in the process of changing. But the question is of evaluating how much change has occurred, what is the mainstream direction of change, and so on. And while it is true that there have been inflection points, such as the school children being killed in Peshawar, but there have been many other inflection points in the past where we thought a change was going to come. For instance, Benazir Bhutto being killed. But in fact, it has not led to a change in the mindset of the national security state, which Neeraj Kumar Saab had referred to. And whether we are nearer that point of change, I don't know. Maybe we are, but we have to see. But I think to jump to the conclusion that a terrible tragedy has occurred and this is bound to change things, I would hesitate to do that, because in the past, this kind of linear thinking has not taken place in Pakistan.
My question is addressed to the ambassador who worked in Pakistan. Any perception of Pakistan, we cannot ignore a recent development, and that is China trying to build an economic corridor linking POK areas with Xinjiang province in China, and then trying to enter into trade relationships which are bordering the sensitive area of Kashmir. Do you not perceive this as a threat to India?
Well, as I said, this is not a new factor. The Karakoram Highway was inaugurated in 1979. So the quote-unquote China-Pakistan axis is not something which we have come to deal with only now. It's a factor which has been there for many years. Yes, I think what the Chinese are trying to do is to develop the infrastructure in Pakistan, because that is the only way they have in their own experience of dealing with a situation of extremism and militancy. This is what they've done in their own country, and certainly they see Pakistan in overall strategic terms and are trying to develop infrastructure through the corridors you mentioned and so on. But I think we need to take a more broader view of this, widen the context. We ourselves are developing a very important relationship with China. If you see what we're doing with China on our east through the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor into the Bay of Bengal, it shows that there are different ways of looking at the role of China in Asia rather than simply as a zero-sum game. But I won't deny the factor that there is a certain strategic move implied in these Chinese moves. That is something which has to be kept in mind all the time.
Whenever we start talking, India starts talking to the civilian government in Pakistan, the incident happens. It is done by Pakistan Army, ISI, telling very straightforward and a simple way to India, hey, you are talking to idiots. Talk to us. They hold the power. Why? Why India can't talk to the Pakistan Army? Yes, it can. Okay, why? And if not, why? If you can answer that. Thank you.
Well, firstly, it's not the case as if attacks take place only when we are talking to the civilian government. Attacks have a certain randomness. For instance, the parliament attack didn't take place at a time when there was an upswing in India-Pakistan relations. If you recall, the Agra summit had failed. Things were not looking well at all. It was an attack which took place when it was a very bad situation. Now, yes, the Pathankot attack took place after the Prime Minister reached out to Mr. Nawaz Sharif. But earlier attacks, the Udhampur attack or the earlier attack before that in northern Kashmir, that was again random. There was no particular reason. It was not as if there was an upswing in our relationship at that time. If anything, things were at a plateau. But come to your question of why don't we talk to the Pakistan Army? You see, the nature of the Pakistan state is different from the nature of the Indian state. Let me give you a simple example. I was talking to my colleagues earlier. If you see the last 20 years, there have been 3 army chiefs in Pakistan. Pervez Musharraf, General Kayani, and now Rahil Sharif. I don't think any of us can count the number of army chiefs we've had in the last 20 years. It's totally a different kind of state. Now, can you talk to the Pakistan army? What would be the means by which you would do so? And is talking itself going to solve everything? I think in the end, you see, policies are more than just talking. And policies work in somewhat inanimate ways, in subterranean ways, and also impersonally. I don't think talking to the Pakistan army itself will solve problems because there are fundamental issues which divide India and Pakistan. Just talking is not going to resolve them. The only way which will resolve them is that if you can contextualize your relationship, do the kind of things which Hindol and Sashi mentioned, and hope that in Pakistan itself, in the internal dynamics of Pakistan, the role of the security establishment reduces to some extent.